Good to see everybody. Hope y'all are doing good. We were just having a conversation about allergies over there just a minute ago. My wife reminded me to take my allergy pill right before I got in the shower, and got out of the shower feeling just fine and forgot to take my allergy pill. So now I'm walked out, and apparently there's some pollen out there because I had a blue vehicle and now I have a green one. And didn't plan on it turning colors on me. Anyway, good to see everybody. Hope y'all are doing well. Hope everybody's had a good weekend. We're going to start off, as you know, in this class, we only have one more week, and we'll be changing up after next week. We've been trying to look at some fundamental concepts of things that we know, the words we know, things we know, but maybe let's scrape off the top all the things that we already know and talk about maybe some stuff that we haven't thought about with it. We've looked at knowledge and the importance of it. We've looked at bias and how a lot of times we approach the Bible with a certain perspective, and that's not always fair. We've talked about culture. We've talked about works. We've talked about the connection of faith, hope, and love. We've talked about a lot of those things, but today, maybe one of my favorite topics really to talk about, and that's the church. It's a pretty fundamental thing in the Bible, and we have our views, and of course everybody has a view of that word. I don't know of anybody who can't tell you what they think about the church. I mean, you got all kinds of views. You got views of folks saying, well, I want to go to a place that I like. And then you got folks saying, well, they're all the same. You got folks saying, well, it doesn't matter what we believe as long as we focus on Jesus. Then you got folks who are saying, no, there seems to be a right and a wrong way to do this. And then you got folks saying, yeah, well, inside of that, there's even more things that we need to be careful for and not do. And then you got we've always done it that way, or we've never done it that way. And so the word church, when you just think of that in general, it's all over the place, what people think about it. And one of the things that is just a truth in my life is I absolutely love the church. And it's not anything about the laws, commands. It's not anything about, in all honesty, it's the people and the like-mindedness that I love so much. I love the unity that's based on diversity in lifestyle, but a common faith and understanding of truth. That's what I love about the church. And so I want to open up for a minute before we get going here. Why, I say that a lot. I get to talk about the church a lot. Why do you love the church? Tell me some things that you love about the church, or tell me something that is important to you about the church. I could just sit and talk about the church all day long. I love this topic. It's my life, and it's your life too. So what do you love about the church? Yes, sir.
I love it because Christ established it.
Well, Christ established it. That's right. And we're going to look at that just a little bit. What do you love personally about the church? What is it that you are, that draws you to it, or brings you back, or brought you in the first place, or benefited you along the way? What do you love about the church?
Love between the people.
The people. And the truth is, this is the thing that's always been interesting to me about that thought. You can find people you love just about anywhere. You know, you can find people you love at work. You can also find people you don't love at work, but you can find people you don't love at church. You know, don't like. How about that? You're supposed to love them all, right? But you know, you can go to any religious group out there, any religious group, and you can find people that are good people that you have things in common with. But there is a community that is formed. There is relationships and bonds that are formed. There's people you trust and people that you've worked alongside with, and people that have raised their kids together and gone through adversity together and been there for each other. I mean, the people obviously is the church. It's us, and those connections, those relationships are huge. I mean, how many times have you been on vacation and ran into somebody who was a member of the so-and-so Church of Christ? You know, and oh, I know that person, and I know that person, and I mean, there's always something exciting about coming across. And I tell you, one of the things that I've always liked about Lads to Leaders, Lads to Leaders is a really great program that the church has. But one of the things I've always loved about it is hearing those other churches' names, the names of those other congregations being called out, from the podium, and hearing those things over and over and over again, so that you almost feel a connection with them. I can tell you there have been times I've driven through places and went, oh, I recognize this town because I recognize, the Iuka Church of Christ or the this or that Church of Christ. And it's almost like you feel like you've got a connection in that town. If I had a flat tire right now, I know exactly who I'd call. Or if I had a problem right now, I know exactly who I'd call. I love those individual connections, but then those brotherhood connections, right? And the fact that when you say that to somebody, there's this, you find out that somebody else is a member of the church, and you almost just say, oh, and there's just a list of things that you feel like you automatically know about those people, and you just feel a connection to them. I think that's the way it's supposed to be. They talk about how the brethren accepted or, different people along the way or took them in, it's a trust network, I think, that's really, really interesting, and that's the way it's supposed to be. All right, what is something else? Yes, ma'am.
One time we were traveling in Europe and Germany and on the train, and we got on the train and we sat near this lady, and automatically the lady smiled at me, and I spoke to her, and in a few minutes we got to talking. I had never seen her before, but we had that connection. We were members of the church.
You love it. You automatically just feel like I can talk to this person. I can get along with this person. Even though if you spent long enough time with them, you may not. At the moment, right? At the moment, you're like, I really feel a connection with this person. Yeah. What else? What do you love about the church? Yes, ma'am.
I love the beautiful acapella singing.
I always love the singing. Interesting you say that. Alan and I showed Alan this the other day. There was a video that came out, and it was a panel of mega church pastors. And the panel was discussing where these mega churches were headed. And one of them looked at the other one and said, tell him about the conversation we had the other day about our worship. And he said, yeah. And the guy says, he said, we have been so focused on our production that we have pushed our members out of worship. He said, we like to have the cutting edge songs, but for the last 10 years, the songs have been written at such a high pitch that our men mostly can't sing these songs, and we've excluded our men from worship. And he said, we have made such a production out of worship that our members show up and watch worship. They don't participate in worship. And then we stand up and say, well, if you don't worship, then you don't love God. And he said, we might need to rethink some of that. And I sat there going, we don't need to rethink it. We've been thinking that the whole time, but I'm with you. The a cappella singing, there's more of a connection in my mind to the people you're singing with when it's just our voices, right? And the connections that we have. It's interesting. Anybody else? What else? What do you love? Steve, what do you love about the church? You love the church pretty well, don't you? Everything. This man has seen people all over the world be converted and convert other people. He's seen the way it's supposed to work, where men teach men who teach men who teach men, and the way it's supposed to be. And I bet you've got a deeper love in a lot of ways than most of us because of all the things you've seen. Anybody else? What do you love about the church? Keith, what do you love about the church? You love it.
I do. And you kind of touched base with it, but the love and care we have as family
Yeah.
is what I see a lot of.
Yeah.
And we just can't do a time that our family can't do a time when that was demonstrated.
It's those connections, and I think what I like about what you're saying, and he said it's those connections when people take care of one another. What I think I like about it is there's not a supposed to, there's a want to. Right? I don't do this because I'm supposed to do it. I do it because I want to do it. And there's a difference. There's a difference in the face The food tastes different when you want to cook it instead of when you're supposed to cook it, right? I mean, you're eating something somebody wanted to cook. It just tastes better than if they were supposed to cook it, you know? What else? Jerry, what do you love about the church?
Well, I'm like everybody else. I love everything about church.
Love everything.
But one key thing is I love the church because we try to go by what this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And when we're in a room with, I think one of the things I also love about the church in most settings, I can't say all settings, but in most settings, is there's this understanding of a view of God's Word. That we begin our conversation understanding that this thing's right, and that we're going to try to figure out what it says, and we're going to try to do it that way. And that's going away in some, some places. But I think as a whole, you begin with a basic understanding. We are going to do what this thing says. If you can show me what it says, then we'll just do it that way. And you're not right, I'm not right. We're just going to do it this way. And I think you're right. I think that's a thing. I want everybody to go to Matthew 16 while you're turning there. Is there anybody else who has anything they want to say about how much they love the church?
I love the people that came before us.
Yeah.
These two congregations that have come together, the ones that kept it strong and set an example for us and passed the torch on to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She says she loves, in this congregation in particular, the people from the two congregations who have come together. In these two congregations, you have leaders who made hard decisions and great decisions and who were good men and women, who were, Bible class teachers, people, ladies who have been teaching children's Bible classes for 40, 50, 60 years, and who kept those congregations strong and feeding the young people and just kept going and going to where here we are. I agree with you. I have a lesson I put together for something I was asked to do, something similar to that. I called it Wells and Walls. And it was because we're drinking from wells that we didn't dig, and we're hiding behind walls that we didn't build. But somebody dug them and somebody built them, And there's a respect for that. And so, anyway, Matthew chapter 16, the word for church, we talked about this a little bit. It just shows up in Scripture. It's a really interesting concept. If you study through and you're studying the word church, there have been commentators who believe, and I don't know this to be true, but it at least points to what I'm talking about, that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are writing their books. They're writing their books after Jesus has established the church. Now, they're writing about a time before the church was established. They weren't writing what was going on while they were with Jesus, and they stopped and wrote a little bit. I mean, they may have taken some notes or something, but the point is it was later in time that they wrote, and so some believe that maybe they used terms in that writing that would have been familiar to the time of the writing, if that makes sense. So, like for instance, in the Old Testament, you come across things, and it'll give a name of a place, and it'll say, and it's still called that until this day. Well, what does that mean? That means that it's still called that until this day. At the time of that writing. It may not, you read that and go, well, that's not called that today. Well, that's because you're reading an old document. When they wrote it, they said, and we named this place, whatever, and it's still called that until this day. Well, long things have happened. So some believe that Jesus would talk about certain things and that they highlighted them from a post-church establishment verbiage. Okay, and that means that when they're writing it, people would have known about it. But the word church just kind of shows up in Matthew. We just kind of come across it. And the word for church is ecclesia, as you know, and called out. But it was not an original word to Jesus, and it was not an original religious word. He borrowed a word of their culture. they already had ecclesias. They already knew about church. But they didn't use it in a religious sense. And so when he uses it, he's using it on their terms, which was kind of interesting. My father-in-law is here, my mother-in-law as well. But my father-in-law and I went to Greece several years ago, and this was always been so interesting to me. We were at Mars Hill, huge rock, size bigger than this room. I mean, massive rock. Maybe not this tall, but definitely bigger than this. And you climb up on it, and that's where in Athens they would get up and they would talk about, religious matters. They love to hear about everything. And they just they felt like that rock had fallen from the gods and was hanging on the side of this mountain. So that's where they went. Well, it's in the shadow of the Parthenon. The Parthenon's right there. And then it's right over downtown, which is called the Agora. And so they would stand here, and in their minds, they were in the shadow of the Parthenon, and they were between God and man. That's kind of where they felt that rock was. Well, while we were standing there, it was very interesting. I'll never forget this because I'd never heard this before, never even heard it. But our guide, who was a member of the church, there's this big, huge rock-shaped boulder here. But he said, I want all of you to look right over here. So the Parthenon's behind us, downtown's in front of us, and right over here was a flat rock that had jut out of the side of the hill as well. This one was kind of big, cloud shaped, kind of fluffier, bigger. That one was flat over there. He said, now that's where the ecclesia met. And we all thought, the church met over here. But not what you think. The word ecclesia, or called out, for them, that was their government. This was where all the religious people got up and talked. This is where they loved to hear about everything new, Acts chapter 17. They loved to hear all these new ideas. If you had some new God, that's where he stood and said, I went through your downtown and I saw the one to the unknown God. Let me talk to you about that guy. There's this over here. He goes, that's where their ecclesia was. And we all kind of looked at him. He said that was their elected officials. And he said the religious people stood over here, but that's where the governors, that's where the magistrates, whatever the words that they were using at the time, they met over there because they also felt like they were in the shadow of the Parthenon and right over the Agora, and they felt like they were also, that's where the word came from, they were the called out who were between God and the gods, the way we looked at it, between the gods and man. And that was their ecclesia. So a lot of the cities used that word to be their government officials. That's the reason it becomes really interesting when Jesus calls his people. Which word have you already connected with it? Have you connected the word yet? That we get called, we don't understand why we're called that sometimes? The elect. He calls us the elect. Well, those were elected officials who were called out. And he's saying, I want my own ecclesia. I'm going to have my own. And so that nodded to a couple of things when he used this word. A royal priesthood. Okay, it nodded to a royal priesthood. It nodded to a different than the world, but there to help the world without being influenced by the world. I mean, it nodded to a lot of those things when he uses this word. Again, we've always known it as a religious term. It's always been a religious term for us. But from everything I understand, it was not originally a religious term. So I want you to think about that when you go to Matthew chapter 16 and you see when Jesus uses it right here. In Matthew chapter 16, you're starting at verse 13. It says, when Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? He says, you've been traveling around with me. You go into the marketplaces to get food. You're the ones that are trying to tell people about me. What's their response? What are they saying? Hey, I want to tell you about Jesus. Yeah, I've heard about him. This is what I think about him. So he said, what are people saying about me? And you know the answer in verse 14. Some say John the Baptist, some Elijah, or others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. They know you're somebody special. They just don't think you're the Son of God. John the Baptist, there was a rumor he had been beheaded. He had been beheaded, but there was a rumor he had been beheaded. And some people thought, well, maybe he hadn't been beheaded. Maybe that was a bad rumor. There were all kinds of rumors going on at the time. They thought maybe he was John the Baptist or, Elijah. Elijah was supposed to come back. Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, and Jesus had a lot of emotion in the things that he would say. And then maybe you're a prophet. We don't think you're the Son of God. And then, so verse 15, he said to them, but who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter, and this is the thing that we know, about the wording in the original language, where it says, Simon Peter said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. We know who you are. You're the one we've been waiting on. You're the one that was prophesied about. You're the one that's going to save us. You're the chosen one. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's who you are. Now he goes to verse 17, and Jesus answered, said, blessed Simon Bar-Jonah, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you by fathers in heaven. The reason he says that right there is because he just had asked, who do men say that I am? Well, some say you're John the Baptist, some say you're Elijah, Jeremiah. He says, no, your answer is based on God, not man. That's all he's saying right there. You have learned your answer by observation of me and your understanding of God. That's what he's saying in that passage. Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father is in heaven. And I also say that you are Peter on this rock. Okay, you know the word there. Peter, Petra, meant rock. And they say, the scholars say that he basically said this: you are rock, and on this boulder I will build my church. The word is a bigger rock. And so it's almost like you are pebble, and on this boulder, because the word Petra, Peter, meant, as a matter of fact, there's some really weird, new, modern translations that call Peter Rocky. Have you heard that? They named him Rocky because Peter translated is rock. And so that was the word they used there. But it was a smaller rock. And so the word that he uses here is a bigger rock. So he's saying what you said is important. Now, I think it's a play on words. He's not establishing as a pope or anything like that, even though we do know that Peter and James were considered pillars of the church in Jerusalem at the time of the writing of Galatians, because Paul mentions that. But that doesn't mean that he was elevating him. He was saying, you are a strong man, and it's based on that strong statement that I'm going to build something strong. That's what he is. Now, there's also, we can get that another time. There's also an Old Testament passage that might come to. That's not what we're trying to get to. So verse 18, and I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Okay, he just kind of plucks this word out. They've been into the towns and they know about this word. And so now he says, I'm going to build one of my own. I'm going to build one of these. Like I said, you read this from a I know what the church is perspective, because we've always known what the church is when we read this passage. If this is the word that Jesus used, which I obviously believe it is, it just kind of came out of nowhere. You got to think about the time of him saying this. If we say that the church wasn't established until Acts chapter 2, then he's talking about the church way up here. Well, he's used this word, and he's going to adopt it. And he's going to use this word to refer to his people. There's an obvious connection of called out or drawn out. Where have you heard the phrase drawn out before? Is there another place in the Bible that talks about something drawn out? Is there a name, maybe? I'm trying to get it to you. You might remember what Moses' name meant. It wasn't Moses' name meant drawn out. So there may be a type and a type in that. We're not real sure. But the point is he's using some things that have been familiar to them. He didn't just create this word and bring this word out. This is one that he said, he took one of their words. So it's not the same as this, so I don't want you to think it is, but it's like us saying we're going to start a movement, and we're going to have our own government. We're going to have our own government. Now, we're not trying to take the place of the real government, but we're going to have our own. We're going to do something, we're going to have a governing body over us. Well, we're using that word, but we're not trying to take the place of that. Do you see what I mean? So if we said, all right, we're going to start a business and we're going to have a board of directors. Well, that doesn't mean that our board of directors is going to be above everybody else's board of directors. We're just going to have one of our own. And we're using that word. And so Jesus is saying we're going to have our own one of these things. And there's going to be some similarities, but he's not saying that mine's going to take over that one. I'm just going to use this word. And there's some things in this passage that are really interesting. I will build. All right? I will build. This church has to be based on Jesus' teachings. Period. Or we are not that church. It has to be this, not this building, not even this people. The governing system that we use has to be based on Jesus, or we're not that. Because see, that's the whole point. We say, well, there's just one church. Well, that was a word that was used. So there were multiple ecclesias that were doing other things. There are plenty of places that can take the word church because they're trying to connect it somehow to the Bible. But if they are not based on what Jesus' teaching was, and refer back to Sermon Sunday night where we talk about how Jesus teaches us today, and that's obviously through his new covenant. If we don't do it based on the way he designed it, then we're not the church that he built. I don't want to be the church that somebody else built. I don't want to be a member of a church that anybody but Jesus built. Well, I have to use the plans he put in place. I mean, I could say you can do a million ways, and you've already got them going in your mind, so I'm not going to go through them all. But you can take, the building of a building example as far as you want to with this. If you had a home, if you want to build a home, and you went to a builder with a great reputation, and you said, I want you and your company to build my home. I want you to build my house. Then they say, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to get somebody else to build. They're not as good as us. And they're going to change it a little bit. They're going to build it the way they want it built. No, I want you to build my house like this. We've agreed on these floor plans. This is what it's going to look like. Well, yeah, but we're going to get somebody else to build. You can go as far as you want to with that. The point is, Jesus is saying, I'm going to build my own group of people. Well, that implies that there's going to be a pattern. And I want to mention this again. I'm going to keep mentioning this until everybody's tired of me saying this. But patternism is under attack right now. In the church, patternism is under attack. Big time. There's a push that there is no pattern for the New Testament, that we are holding on to dangerous Reformation and Restoration concepts that are not biblical. That's the wording that's being used right now. Is that we speak where the Bible speaks, be silent where the Bible's silent? Yeah, we just made that up. Well, no, we didn't. That's a concept that's found all throughout the Bible. Not to mention these other thoughts. There are other things that they're saying. They're saying that really the church and religion and discipleship is solely based on loving Jesus. And loving Jesus is loving God and loving your neighbor. That's the weightiest of it all. Well, we believe in all those things. But that's not all there is. If that were the case, the Bible would be real short. Hey, let's just love everybody. Love everybody, you get to go to heaven. That would take a page. A paragraph. How long does that take to explain? Give some examples. Okay, we'll do a chapter. Okay, we'll do a chapter on each of them. Now we've got 2 chapters. There's obviously more to this than that. But patternism is under attack, and it's saying in the church, and it's saying that we've got this wrong, that there is no pattern for worship. God accepts all worship. There is no pattern for salvation. You just need to be connected with God. Well, what that does, it wipes away baptism. It allows anything to happen in worship. Men's, women's role. It wipes everything out. Well, Paul even told Timothy, I want you to follow the pattern of sound doctrine. That Jesus says, I'm going to build. He uses building terms all along the way. Chief cornerstone, building blocks. You're being built up. He uses that on purpose over and over and over through the inspired writers as well. And so the point is, he's trying to go out of his way to say, I want it like this. Well, you and I say, well, I don't like it like that. Well, then we have a choice. Do we want to be a member of the church that we want, or the member of the church that Jesus built? And that's our choices. Do I want to be a member of the church that I want to be a member of, or do I want to be a member of the church that Jesus built? And again, I agree, there is but one church when we look at it like in the true sense. But the word itself can be used in other contexts and has been used in other contexts. So I want to be a member of this one right there, because this is the one that Jesus said, I'm going to build. Well, that's what I want to be a part of. And everybody says that. See, nobody's going to say, well, I don't really want to be a part of it. Everybody's going to say, yeah, I want to be the one. You and I just see it differently. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you something. It doesn't matter how I see this. And it doesn't matter how you see this. It matters what's right. What does Jesus want? How does he see it? It's his church. It belongs to him. And so that goes back to the next point here. I will build, and then he says, my church, possession. The word my is possession. It's his. It should be named after him. Belongs to him. We call ourselves the Church of Christ. In the Bible, the church is called the Church of God. But somebody says, well, what does it matter what we're called? Why don't we call it, let's just come up with a cool word and call it that. Or, it matters. Because it's not our title, it's our definition. We want to be the church of Jesus the Christ. That's what we want to be. And personally, I don't have a problem with us calling ourselves the Church of Christ, or I don't have a problem with us using. We're not denominationalizing the words if we're using it as identification, because in the current culture there are so many religious groups. We need an identification, and so we can't. Now, I've heard a lot of people say Church of Christers and things like that. And I get where they're coming from. In our culture, that makes sense. In our culture, because there's so many divisions in what is called Christendom or Christianity as a whole. There's so many divisions in it that we need an identification. But the truth of the matter is we're in a place right now where they don't even completely identify you. And I'll tell you this too. Just because we have Church of Christ on the door doesn't mean we are the Church of Christ. Just because it's written on the sign doesn't mean that we are the church. We have to do it the way the builder told us to do it, or we're not that church. And to be honest with you, I'm not saying I wish I could change things in the Bible, but there are things that would make it a whole lot easier for us. And everybody just doing it however they want to would be a great change. Be a whole lot easier. But that's just not how he did it. And that's not how he set it up. And so when he says, I'm going to build my church, our number one priority is to be pleasing to the builder. Our number two priority is to maintain what the builder set in place. And I say number two, they're the equal. But we've got to please him since he's the builder. And that we do that by keeping it the way he wants. But that's not just doctrine. That's not just women's role. It's not just limited to baptism. It's not just instrumental music. It's our faithfulness to him through this organization, through this body. It's our faithfulness in him. It's what we do when we leave here. It's how we apply those things. It's not just worshiping right, and it's not just not doing things wrong. The church is not about not just doing things wrong. The church is about being who God wants us to be every day as a part of his body. It's It's about the decisions I make and the words I use and the things I do and the things I go out of my way to do and the opportunities I look for and the way I live my life and the way I want other people to know about that. So my church here is really important because when we're introduced to the Word, He's saying, I'm going to build one that belongs to me. Well, I can't go over on that rock in Athens and do what they're doing. They're called the church. That's what they were called. I can't go over on that rock in Athens and do what they're doing and say that I'm a part of Jesus' church. I can't go over and find another rock that I like and start doing it the way I like doing it and say that I'm a member of Jesus' church. I have to have authority, which is what we're going to look at next week. I have to have authority from Jesus to do it the way He wants us to because it's His church. And that's what He says right here, the possession. So there's another thing that you'll see here. The word church is used singularly and plural in the New Testament. Here it's singular. There are places where Paul talks about all the churches in certain areas. Well, he's not saying that there were a bunch of different churches. He was saying there are a bunch of different congregations of people, right? So when he introduces it, he doesn't say, I'm going to build my churches. A lot of times we learn in what the Bible doesn't say when it tells us certain things. He didn't say, I'm going to build a bunch of these things. He said, I'm going to build mine, and the word is singular. I'm going to build my church. Well, singular, possessive. Pretty important. It's pretty important. You have your house. You got rules in your house, right? You have the right to make rules in your house. If you just had brand new white carpet put down in your house, first of all, you're crazy. Second of all, you got the right to say, I want you to take your shoes off when you come in my house. What's your house? You bought it. You're the one that put the carpet down, and you're the one that wants it to stay that way. So you can say, I don't want you wearing your shoes on my carpet. Now, I can come in your house and choose to wear shoes or not. But you get to determine that. Now, my point in saying that is I can choose not to come in your house and go to the next door neighbor's house. Well, if I go to the next door neighbor's house that's hardwood and I keep my shoes on, can I come back out and say that I went to your house? No. I can't say that. Well, I went to a house and it was close. I didn't go into your house. I went into a house that was next door and I did it the way I wanted to do it. That's the point here. Is when he says, I'm going to build my church, and then he says the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. Seemingly unnecessary statement, to be honest with you. If you're looking at the flow of this, it's seemingly unnecessary. That of all that's going on in this, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it, doesn't seem almost like he's going, oh, by the way. But that's maybe the strongest statement of them all. His point is, I will build a church, and if maintained correctly, can withstand anything. Even the Hadean realm itself. Well, Jesus had already talked to them in the Sermon on the Mount about building a house that will last. And when you build that foundation, and you dig deep and all those things, when the winds come and the floods come, one goes flat and one's still standing. It's almost like he's referring back to that with this term, or at least adding to it. When he's talking about, I'm going to build something, and if it's built and maintained the way I want it to, it will last. It will last through anything. It will withstand anything. I think that one of the things that he's referring to is cultural changes, ups and downs. Because this church that he was going to have to build, that Jesus was going to build, it was going to have to withstand Rome. And Rome was already strong at the time of its building. It was going to have to withstand all those things that were going on in all these different places. Crete, that was known to be a terrible, horrible place where they exonerated and lifted up deceit and deception. And he built that church during that time, and that church would be built, and it was going to have to withstand all that. And we're still standing here. We use this verse a lot during COVID. We're going to make it. We're going to be okay. I spoke at probably 10 things after COVID where people saying, tell us where we are now. It was not that I was in the authority. That was just the topic that was given. And I went to this passage. And I said, Jesus built it to last. And if we do it right, we will. Now, there may be times where there's lesser of us than other times. There are not as many of us as at different times. But we don't get to change the laws of the church because we don't think it's working. We don't get to change the parameters that Jesus set because we don't think it's working. Sometimes it's going to work. There's an in season and an out of season, right? Sometimes it's going to be great. Sometimes it's going to be difficult. We don't get to change that because we don't see the results we want. I have to do it the way he wants us to do it no matter what. And I'll die on any hill I need to die on if I can prove it with Scripture. And I think you will too. And so this idea of I will build my church and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it is saying if you do it right, you can last through anything. And I think the implication here is individual, collective. Anytime we're talking about the church, or most times we're talking about the church, you can apply it individually and collective. He divides them up in 1 Corinthians. In 1 Corinthians 3, he says the church, plural. And then he goes in chapter 6 and he uses it singular. You. The word you is the one that changes. You are this. And he uses it plural at first in 1 Corinthians 3 and then singular in 1 Corinthians 6. And he's saying you, collectively, you're the temple of God. And then he says you are the temple of God. And so he's using the same words in two different places. You read through, you see how he's connecting those things. But his point is collectively we can withstand anything, and individually we can withstand anything. The Bible does not say that God will not give you more than you can stand. It don't say that. He says you won't be tempted beyond what you are able. That's different. There's a lot of hard things in this life, and you're not weak if they hurt. But if we're doing this right, we can withstand it. If we're doing it right, we can hang on. So a couple things as we're concluding. Acts chapter 20 and verse 28, we're told to shepherd the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood. Jesus purchased the church, and the church is valuable because he paid for it with his life. Okay, all right, I told you I could do this one all day. I love this one. All right, Christ is the head of the church, Ephesians 1, 22 and 23. The church is the body under Christ's authority. 1 Timothy 3, verse 15, the church of the living God is the pillar and the grounds of the truth. The church supports and upholds God's truth in the world. When we don't do it, who's left to season? You know what I mean? If the salt loses its flavor, right? So then the church is central to God's eternal plan, Ephesians 3, 10 through 11, that now the manifold wisdom of God might be made known by the church according to his eternal purpose. The church is a part of God's eternal purpose. Acts 2:47, the Lord added to the church daily those who are being saved. The saved are added by God to the church, not by anybody else. You're not voted on. You're not put on. God adds you to the church at the time of baptism, Acts 2:47. Salvation and belonging of the church are directly connected to God placing you in the church. It's the concept of sanctifying, delivering, conveying. He has picked you up when you're back, and he doesn't just take away your sin. He adds you to the church. The church is the kingdom of Christ, Colossians 1:13. He has delivered us from the power of darkness and conveyed us into the kingdom of the Son of his love. So Christians are citizens of Christ's kingdom on earth. The church is the temple where God dwells, Ephesians 2:21, in whom the whole building grows into a holy temple in the Lord, a dwelling place of God in the Spirit. And God dwells among us. Christ loved the church and died for it. Ephesians 5:25, Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. The church matters to Jesus very, very, very deeply. The church edifies and strengthens believers. Ephesians 4:12, for the equipping of the saints, the work of ministry, the edifying of the body of Christ. The church exists to build up and mature Christians. We exist to create, maintain, and grow spiritually. And the church displays God's wisdom to the world. Ephesians 3:10, that now the manifold wisdom of God might be made known to the church. Passage we mentioned a minute ago. But through the church, God's wisdom is revealed to the world. This is not just something we come to. This is who we are. You have never been given a higher honor than to be called a member of the Lord's church. They don't have a higher honor than that because God put you there, and he put you there when you decided to commit yourself to him and were obedient. And so it's really interesting when we look at the church. It's more than we think. I wish we had time. I could do this. I love the church. I love talking about it. All right, everybody just stay here.